Marcus Chen adjusted his worn-out backpack straps as he walked through the gleaming corridors of Stellar Dynamics, one of the most prestigious aerospace companies in the country. The building towered above the city skyline, its glass walls reflecting the morning sun like a beacon of innovation. For Marcus, this was more than just a building. It was the realization of a childhood dream that had seemed impossible just months ago. At 22, Marcus didn't look like the typical intern at Stellar Dynamics. While his peers arrived in expensive cars wearing designer clothes, Marcus took the bus and wore the same 3 button-down shirts he had bought from a discount store. His shoes, though polished every morning, showed signs of wear that no amount of care could hide. But what Marcus lacked in material wealth, he made up for in determination and an almost obsessive love for rockets. Growing up in a small apartment above his parents' laundromat, Marcus had spent countless nights on the fire escape, staring up at the stars. His mother, Elena, worked double shifts as a hospital cleaner, while his father, David, repaired washing machines and dryers with hands that never seemed to get completely clean. They had immigrated from Guatemala when Marcus was 5, carrying nothing but hopes for their son's future and a fierce belief that education could change everything. The laundromat became Marcus's first laboratory. Between folding clothes and helping customers, he built model rockets from cardboard tubes and salvaged materials. His parents watched with a mixture of pride and worry as their son filled notebooks with calculations and sketches that looked like hieroglyphics to them. They didn't understand the complex formulas, but they understood passion when they saw it. In high school, Marcus's physics teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, noticed his exceptional talent. She stayed after school to help him with advanced concepts and even used her own money to buy him rocket building supplies. When other students were playing video games or hanging out at the mall, Marcus was in the school's basement workshop, testing thrust calculations and experimenting with different fuel mixtures. His rockets weren't pretty, but they flew higher and straighter than anything his classmates built. College was a struggle. While his grades earned him a partial scholarship to the state university, Marcus still needed to work nights at a fast food restaurant to cover expenses. He often fell asleep in lectures, exhausted from closing shifts that ended at 2 in the morning. But somehow, he managed to maintain a perfect GPA in aerospace engineering, while his professors began to take notice of his innovative thinking. The internship at Stellar Dynamics came as a shock. Marcus had applied along with hundreds of other students, never expecting to hear back from such a prestigious company. When the acceptance email arrived, he read it 5 times before believing it was real. His parents cried with joy, though they worried about their son working alongside people who came from completely different worlds. On his first day, Marcus quickly realized he was different from the other interns. There was Jennifer, whose father owned a chain of luxury hotels and who had spent her summer vacation in Europe studying rocket designs at prestigious institutions. There was Brad, who arrived in a Tesla and casually mentioned his family's connections to NASA executives. And there was Sarah, who had already published research papers with her professor and spoke about complex theories as if they were simple math problems. The senior engineers treated the interns with polite distance, assigning them basic tasks, like organizing files, updating databases, and fetching coffee. Marcus didn't mind. He was grateful for any opportunity to be around real rocket scientists. He arrived early every morning and stayed late every evening, absorbing everything he could learn from conversations and meetings he wasn't officially part of. Dr. Elizabeth Harrison, the lead propulsion engineer, was a legend in the aerospace industry. She had designed engines for 3 successful Mars missions and held dozens of patents. Her office walls were covered with awards and photos of rockets she had helped create. She was brilliant, demanding, and had little patience for mistakes. Most interns were terrified of her, but Marcus found himself fascinated by her work. During his second week, Marcus was organizing Dr. Harrison's technical files when he came across plans for the company's next major project, a revolutionary rocket engine designed to carry heavier payloads to Mars more efficiently than ever before. The design was elegant and sophisticated, the result of months of work by the company's best engineers. But as Marcus studied the blueprints, something bothered him. Late that night in his tiny studio apartment, Marcus spread the copied diagrams across his kitchen table. His calculations, done by hand on notebook paper, suggested there might be a problem with the fuel flow dynamics in the upper combustion chamber. The issue was subtle, something that might not show up in computer simulations but could cause problems during actual flight conditions. Marcus double-checked his math, then checked it again. He ran through the calculations from different angles, considered various flight scenarios, and tested his theories against everything he had learned in college. Each time he arrived at the same conclusion. There was a potential weakness in the design that could lead to engine failure at a critical moment. The next morning, Marcus stood outside Dr. Harrison's office for 20 minutes, gathering courage to knock. When he finally did, her sharp voice called for him to enter. Dr. Harrison barely looked up from her computer screen as he nervously explained what he had found. She listened with growing irritation, clearly annoyed that an intern was questioning the work of experienced engineers. "Mr. Chen," she said coolly, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but these designs have been reviewed by engineers with decades of experience. I suggest you focus on your assigned tasks instead of trying to find problems where none exist." Marcus felt his face burn with embarrassment. He apologized and quickly left her office, hearing whispers and chuckles from other engineers who had witnessed the exchange. Word spread quickly through the office that the immigrant kid from the state school thought he could outsmart the senior team. For the rest of that week, Marcus endured subtle jokes and patronizing comments from his fellow interns and some of the junior engineers. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was right. That evening, he called his former physics teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, and explained the situation. She listened carefully, then gave him advice that would change everything. "Marcus, being right isn't enough. You need to prove it in a way that nobody can ignore." That night, Marcus began working on something that would either vindicate his theory or end his internship in spectacular failure. He was going to build his own rocket engine design, one that would demonstrate the flaws he had identified while showing a better solution. Armed with nothing but determination, a handful of salvaged materials, and calculations done on notebook paper, the overlooked intern was about to begin the most important project of his young life. Marcus spent his weekends haunting junkyards and surplus stores, searching for materials that could help him build a prototype engine. His budget was practically non-existent. After paying rent and sending money home to help his parents, he had maybe $50 a month for his project. But growing up poor had taught him to be resourceful. Where others saw junk, Marcus saw possibilities. At Salvage Sam's Auto Parts, he found aluminum tubing that could work for fuel lines. The owner, a gruff man named Sam who had taken a liking to the polite young man who always said please and thank you, let Marcus dig through the scrap pile for free. At an electronics surplus store, Marcus discovered pressure gauges and valves that were outdated but still functional. The store clerk, impressed by Marcus's knowledge and passion, gave him a significant discount on components that would normally cost hundreds of dollars. Marcus's studio apartment transformed into a makeshift laboratory. His kitchen table became a drafting board covered with hand-drawn schematics. His bathroom counter held small metal components soaking in cleaning solutions. The living room floor was covered with carefully organized piles of salvaged materials, each piece labeled and cataloged in a notebook he carried everywhere. His neighbors complained about the smell of metal polish and cleaning solvents that seemed to seep through the thin apartment walls. Mrs. Patterson from next door knocked on his door twice to ask if everything was okay, concerned about the late-night sounds of grinding and tapping that came from his apartment. Marcus apologized profusely and tried to work more quietly, but his project demanded precision that couldn't be rushed. During his lunch breaks at Stellar Dynamics, Marcus would slip away to the company library and research advanced propulsion theories. He photocopied dozens of technical papers, studying them during his bus rides to and from work. His fellow interns noticed his absence during lunch gatherings but assumed he was just antisocial. They had no idea he was developing a revolutionary engine design in his spare time. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday evening in October. Marcus had been struggling with the combustion chamber design for weeks, trying to find a way to improve fuel mixing efficiency while maintaining structural integrity. Traditional designs used a single injection point, but Marcus theorized that multiple smaller injection points arranged in a spiral pattern could create better fuel distribution and more complete combustion. Using a technique he had learned from watching his father repair washing machine drums, Marcus carefully drilled precise holes in a salvaged aluminum cylinder. The work required incredible patience. Each hole had to be exactly the right size and positioned at precisely calculated angles. One mistake would ruin hours of work and waste materials he couldn't afford to replace. As Marcus worked by the light of a desk lamp in his tiny apartment, he thought about his parents sleeping in their bed just a few miles away. His mother would be getting up in 3 hours for her early shift at the hospital, and his father would spend another day hunched over broken appliances in the laundromat's back room. They had sacrificed everything to give him opportunities they never had, and he was determined not to let them down. The first test of his prototype was conducted in secret at the university's engineering lab. Marcus had arranged to use the facility through his former professor, Dr. Kim, who remembered him as one of his most dedicated students. The test was scheduled for a Saturday morning when the building would be empty, giving Marcus the privacy he needed to work without questions or interference. Marcus arrived at the lab carrying his prototype engine in a duffel bag, along with a small tank of compressed air and the fuel mixture he had carefully prepared. His hands shook slightly as he set up the test equipment, running through his calculations one final time. Everything looked correct on paper, but theoretical calculations and real-world performance could be very different things. The first ignition lasted only 3 seconds before the engine shut down automatically due to pressure irregularities. Marcus's heart sank as he examined the data readings. Something wasn't working as planned, and he only had enough materials for 2 more test attempts. He spent an hour going over every connection, every calculation, every component, looking for the problem. The issue turned out to be a simple one, a loose valve connection that was allowing fuel to leak before reaching the combustion chamber. Marcus tightened the connection and prepared for his second test. This time, the engine ran for nearly 30 seconds, producing a steady blue flame and generating impressive thrust readings for its size. But it was the third test that changed everything. Marcus had made small adjustments to the fuel mixture and injection timing based on data from the previous tests. When he ignited the engine this time, it ran smoothly for over 2 minutes, producing thrust measurements that exceeded his most optimistic projections. The fuel efficiency was remarkable, and the engine remained stable throughout the entire burn duration. As Marcus stood in the empty lab staring at the data printouts that proved his design worked, he felt a mixture of excitement and terror. He had actually done it. He had built an engine that outperformed the theoretical specifications of stellar dynamics design. But now he faced an even bigger challenge: how to present his findings without getting fired for insubordination. That weekend, Marcus called Mrs. Rodriguez and shared his test results. She was amazed by what he had accomplished but warned him about the challenges ahead. In her experience, people in positions of power didn't like being shown up by someone they considered beneath them, especially someone young and from a different background. "You have 2 choices, Marcus," she told him during their long phone conversation. "You can keep quiet and let them discover the problem on their own, possibly after a very expensive failure, or you can find a way to present your solution that makes them feel smart for listening to you instead of stupid for missing the problem." Marcus chose a third option, one that was risky but aligned with his values. He would present his findings, honestly and directly, letting the data speak for itself. If the company valued innovation and excellence above ego and hierarchy, they would recognize the merit of his work. If they didn't, then maybe he didn't want to work there anyway. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, with November wind rattling the windows of stellar dynamics. Marcus arrived early, carrying a carefully prepared presentation folder and a small metal case containing his prototype engine. He had practiced his presentation dozens of times in his apartment mirror, refining his explanations until they were clear and compelling. But first he needed allies. Marcus approached Jennifer, the intern whose father owned hotels during the morning coffee break. Despite their different backgrounds, Jennifer had always been kind to him and had shown genuine interest in technical discussions. Marcus explained, his situation carefully, showing her some of his calculations and test data. Jennifer studied the papers with the critical eye of someone who had grown up around successful business people. After 20 minutes, she looked up with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Marcus, this is incredible work. But you realize what you're doing, right? You're basically telling the senior engineers that they missed something fundamental." "No," Marcus replied quietly. "But I can't let them build something that might fail. Too many people's careers and dreams depend on this project succeeding." Jennifer nodded slowly, then made a decision that would prove crucial. "My father always says that timing is everything in business. Don't go to Dr. Harrison directly. She'll just shut you down again. Wait for the right moment, when you have an audience that includes people who care more about results than pride." That moment came sooner than expected. The following Wednesday, Stellar Dynamics was scheduled to host a quarterly review meeting, where department heads would present progress reports to company executives and board members. It was exactly the kind of high-stakes environment where Marcus's discovery could either launch his career or destroy it completely. As Marcus watched the preparations for the big meeting, he realized he was running out of time to act. The company was moving forward with their flawed design, and once they committed resources to full-scale production, it would be nearly impossible to change course. He had perhaps one chance to present his alternative, and everything depended on finding the courage to take it. The quarterly review meeting was scheduled for Friday morning in Stellar Dynamics' largest conference room, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and walls lined with photos of successful rocket launches. Marcus had walked past this room dozens of times during his internship, but he had never imagined he would have a reason to enter it. Company executives, department heads, and senior engineers began arriving early, their expensive suits and confident conversations, creating an atmosphere that felt both exciting and intimidating. Marcus watched from his desk as Dr. Harrison made final preparations for her presentation, reviewing slides that showcased the revolutionary engine design that would carry the next Mars mission payload. Jennifer approached Marcus's desk just before the meeting began. She had been thinking about their conversation all week, and her business instincts told her that Marcus was sitting on something potentially explosive. "Are you really going to do this?" she asked quietly, noting the manila folder and small, metal case beside his computer. Marcus nodded, though his hands were trembling slightly. "I have to. If I don't speak up and something goes wrong during the mission, I'll never forgive myself. Those astronauts deserve the best engine we can possibly give them." The meeting began with presentations from various department heads, each showcasing their progress on different aspects of the Mars mission project. The mood was optimistic and self-congratulatory, as executives praised the innovative work being done throughout the company. Marcus felt increasingly nervous as Dr. Harrison's presentation time approached. When Dr. Harrison took the podium, she commanded the room's attention immediately. Her presentation was polished and professional, filled with impressive technical specifications and projected performance data. She explained how their new engine design would revolutionize space travel, making missions more efficient and cost-effective than ever before. The executives nodded approvingly as she outlined timelines for testing and implementation, but Marcus noticed something troubling in the questions that followed Dr. Harrison's presentation. Several board members expressed concerns about the project timeline, worried about meeting launch deadlines that were already tight. The pressure to move quickly was clearly influencing technical decisions, and Marcus realized that thorough testing might be sacrificed for speed. As the meeting was winding down and people were beginning to gather their materials, Marcus made a decision that would change his life forever. He stood up from his seat in the back of the room, his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. "Excuse me," he said, his voice barely audible over the sound of shuffling papers and quiet conversations. The room didn't stop. Marcus cleared his throat and tried again, louder this time. "Excuse me, I have some concerns about the engine design that I think you should know about." Now the room fell silent. Every head turned to look at the young intern who had just interrupted a high-level executive meeting. Dr. Harrison's face went pale, then red with anger. Several executives looked confused, as if they couldn't quite believe what was happening. "Mr. Chen," Dr. Harrison said through clenched teeth. "This is not the time or place for intern questions. Please return to your desk immediately." But Marcus had committed himself now, and there was no turning back. "I understand this is unusual, but I've identified a potential problem with the fuel flow dynamics that could cause engine failure during critical mission phases. I've run extensive calculations and even built a prototype to test my theory." The room erupted in murmurs and uncomfortable shifting. Some people looked shocked at the intern's audacity, while others seemed intrigued by his claims. Robert Sterling, the company's CEO, raised his hand for silence. He was known for his analytical mind and his willingness to hear unconventional ideas, which had helped build Stellar Dynamics into an industry leader. "This is highly irregular," Sterling said slowly, studying Marcus with calculating eyes. "But if you're claiming there's a safety issue with our design, we need to hear what you have to say. Dr. Harrison, I assume you're familiar with this intern's concerns." Dr. Harrison's composure was cracking under the pressure of having her work questioned in front of the entire leadership team. "Mr. Chen approached me several weeks ago with some amateur calculations that showed fundamental misunderstandings of advanced propulsion principles. I explained to him that our design has been thoroughly reviewed by experienced engineers." Marcus felt the weight of every eye in the room, but he also felt a calm determination settling over him. This was his moment to prove that good engineering was more important than corporate hierarchy. "With respect, Dr. Harrison, I believe my calculations were correct. I have test data from a prototype engine I built that demonstrates the problem and offers a potential solution." Sterling gestured toward the front of the room. "Show us." Marcus walked to the front on unsteady legs, acutely aware of his discount store shirt and worn shoes compared to the expensive attire surrounding him. He opened his folder and began distributing copies of his handwritten calculations, apologizing for their informal appearance as he explained his methodology. "The primary issue," Marcus began, his voice growing stronger as he focused on the technical content, "is in the upper combustion chamber fuel distribution pattern. The current design uses a single high-pressure injection point, which creates adequate thrust but results in incomplete fuel burn and potential hotspot formation." He moved to the whiteboard and began sketching diagrams to illustrate his points. As he talked, Marcus forgot about his nervousness and lost himself in the technical details he had studied obsessively for months. He explained fuel flow dynamics, combustion efficiency ratios, and thermal stress patterns with the passion of someone who truly understood the subject. Dr. Harrison interrupted several times, challenging his assumptions and questioning his qualifications to make such claims. But Marcus answered each challenge calmly, backing up every statement with data from his prototype tests. Several senior engineers began asking detailed technical questions, and Marcus could see growing interest and concern in their faces as they followed his reasoning. The turning point came when Marcus opened his metal case and revealed his prototype engine. The device was clearly built from salvaged materials and looked rough compared to the company's sophisticated equipment. But when he presented his test data showing superior fuel efficiency and more stable combustion characteristics, the room fell silent. "Where did you conduct these tests?" asked Dr. Patricia Williams, the company's chief technical officer. "At the State University's engineering lab with permission from my former professor. I used industry-standard testing equipment and followed established protocols for all measurements." Marcus handed her the detailed test logs he had carefully maintained throughout his experiments. Dr. Williams studied the data for several minutes while the room waited in tense silence. She was known for her rigorous analytical standards and her ability to spot flaws in both designs and data. When she finally looked up, her expression was troubled. "These results appear to be legitimate," she said slowly. "If this data is accurate, then our current design may indeed have the efficiency problems Mr. Chen has identified." The room erupted in urgent conversations as the implications became clear. If Marcus was right, the company was potentially months away from committing millions of dollars to a flawed design that could fail during a critical mission. The reputational and financial consequences of such a failure would be catastrophic. Sterling raised his hand again for quiet. "Dr. Harrison, how quickly can we verify these claims through independent testing?" Dr. Harrison looked trapped between her professional pride and the growing evidence that she might have missed something crucial. We could run computer simulations within a week, but full-scale testing would take at least a month. And what about implementation of the alternative design Mr. Chen has proposed? Marcus felt a surge of panic as he realized the conversation was moving beyond his calculations to practical implementation questions he hadn't fully considered. I would need to work with experienced engineers to scale up the design and ensure it meets all safety requirements, he said honestly. My prototype proves the concept works, but turning it into a production engine would require expertise I don't have. Sterling nodded approvingly at Marcus's humble response. Dr. Williams, I want you to assemble a team to verify Mr. Chen's findings immediately. If his analysis is correct, we need to know as soon as possible so we can adjust our timeline accordingly. As the meeting broke up, Marcus found himself surrounded by engineers asking technical questions and executives inquiring about his background. Dr. Harrison left the room without speaking to him, her face a mask of professional composure that couldn't quite hide her anger and embarrassment. Jennifer appeared at Marcus's side, grinning with excitement. I can't believe you actually did that, she whispered. Do you realize what just happened? You just potentially saved a multi-million-dollar mission and maybe some astronauts' lives. But Marcus felt more overwhelmed than victorious. He had opened a door he wasn't sure he was prepared to walk through, and the consequences of his actions were only beginning to unfold. The weekend following the presentation felt like the longest of Marcus's life. He spent Saturday pacing around his small apartment, alternating between excitement about the possibilities ahead and terror about what he might have set in motion. His phone remained stubbornly silent, leaving him to wonder if Dr. Williams's team had even begun their verification testing. On Sunday, Marcus called his parents to tell them about what had happened. His mother listened quietly as he explained the situation in simple terms, avoiding the technical details that would only confuse them. When he finished, there was a long pause before she spoke. Mijo, Elena said softly, your father and I didn't come to this country so you could hide your talents. We came so you could use them to help people. If you believe your ideas can keep astronauts safe, then you did the right thing, no matter what happens next. Her words gave Marcus the strength he needed to face Monday morning. He arrived at Stellar Dynamics early, as usual, but found the office atmosphere dramatically changed. Word of his presentation had spread throughout the company, creating clusters of whispered conversations that stopped whenever he walked by. Some colleagues looked at him with newfound respect, while others seemed resentful of the attention he was receiving. Dr. Harrison avoided him completely, but Marcus noticed her holding urgent meetings with her senior staff throughout the morning. He tried to focus on his regular intern duties, but concentration proved impossible when his entire future hung in the balance of test results he had no control over. Around 11 o'clock, Jennifer approached his desk with an expression Marcus couldn't read. Dr. Williams wants to see you in the testing lab, she said quietly. Now. Marcus's stomach dropped as he followed Jennifer through corridors he had never explored before. The testing lab was located in a secure section of the building where interns normally weren't allowed. As they approached the heavy metal doors, Marcus could hear the distinctive sound of rocket engines firing in controlled bursts. Dr. Williams met them at the lab entrance, her expression serious but not hostile. Mr. Chen, we've spent the weekend running tests based on your analysis. I think you need to see the results. The testing lab was impressive beyond Marcus's imagination. Banks of computer monitors displayed real-time data streams, while massive test engines were mounted on sophisticated measuring equipment. The air smelled of fuel and hot metal, and the sound of engines firing created a constant background rumble that Marcus felt in his chest. We built 3 different engine configurations, Dr. Williams explained as she led him toward a control station. One matching our original design, one based on your spiral injection concept, and one hybrid design that combines elements of both approaches. Marcus watched the monitors displaying thrust measurements, fuel consumption rates, and combustion temperature data. Even without detailed analysis, the differences between the 3 designs were striking. His spiral injection concept was clearly outperforming the original design in every measurable category. The results are conclusive, Dr. Williams continued. Your design achieves approximately 15% better fuel efficiency, produces more stable thrust characteristics, and generates significantly less thermal stress on engine components. In practical terms, this could extend mission range, increase payload capacity, or provide crucial safety margins during critical operations. Marcus felt his knees go weak with relief and vindication. He had been right, and his crude prototype had led to discoveries that could revolutionize space travel. But his excitement was tempered by uncertainty about what this meant for his future at the company. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Dr. Williams smiled for the first time since he had met her. "Now we figure out how to implement your design while giving you the credit you deserve. But first I need to ask you something important. Are you interested in staying with Stellar Dynamics as more than just an intern?" The offer that followed exceeded Marcus's wildest dreams. The company wanted to hire him immediately as a junior engineer, with a salary that would allow him to move out of his studio apartment and help his parents in ways he had never imagined possible. More importantly, they wanted him to lead a team responsible for developing his engine design into a production-ready system. But the opportunity came with challenges Marcus hadn't anticipated. Dr. Harrison, while professionally cooperative, made it clear that she felt humiliated by the situation. Several senior engineers who had worked on the original design expressed resentment toward the young intern who had exposed their oversight. Marcus found himself navigating office politics that were far more complex than any engineering problem he had ever solved. The first team meeting was particularly difficult. Marcus sat at a conference table surrounded by engineers with decades of experience, all of whom were now expected to take direction from someone who had been fetching coffee for them just weeks earlier. The tension in the room was palpable as Marcus tried to explain his design concepts to people who clearly felt their expertise was being questioned. "Look," said Tom Bradley, a senior engineer with 20 years at the company, "I understand that the kids' calculations worked out, but there's a big difference between building a prototype in a college lab and designing something that has to work perfectly in the vacuum of space." Marcus felt his face burning with embarrassment, but he forced himself to respond calmly. "You're absolutely right, Mr. Bradley. I know I have a lot to learn about production engineering and space-grade manufacturing. That's exactly why I need your experience and expertise to make this work." The acknowledgement of his limitations, combined with genuine respect for his colleagues' knowledge, began to break down some of the resistance. Over the following weeks, Marcus worked tirelessly to prove that his promotion was based on merit rather than favoritism. He arrived early and stayed late, double-checking every calculation and deferring to senior engineers whenever questions arose outside his area of expertise. Gradually, the team dynamics began to improve. Tom Bradley, initially one of Marcus's harshest critics, became a valuable mentor after Marcus successfully solved a complex manufacturing problem that had been puzzling the senior engineer for weeks. Other team members began to appreciate Marcus's fresh perspective and his willingness to challenge conventional approaches. The real breakthrough came during a design review meeting 6 weeks after Marcus's promotion. The team was struggling with a thermal management issue that threatened to delay the project timeline. Traditional cooling approaches weren't working effectively with the spiral injection design, and several proposed solutions would add unacceptable weight to the engine. Marcus had been quietly working on the problem for days, sketching ideas during his lunch breaks and running calculations late into the evening. During the meeting, he tentatively proposed a solution inspired by something he had observed in his father's laundromat: the way heat exchangers and industrial dryers used airflow patterns to maximize cooling efficiency. The room fell silent as Marcus explained his concept, using whiteboard sketches to illustrate how modified airflow channels could provide superior cooling while actually reducing engine weight. Tom Bradley studied the drawings carefully, running through thermal transfer calculations in his head. "That's brilliant," he said finally, looking at Marcus with genuine admiration. "It's so simple I can't believe none of us thought of it. This could solve our cooling problem and give us better performance characteristics than we originally projected." For the first time since his promotion, Marcus felt like he truly belonged on the team. His colleagues were no longer seeing him as the lucky intern who had stumbled onto a good idea, but as a legitimate engineer whose unconventional background brought valuable perspectives to their work. The success also meant that Marcus's design was moving closer to actual implementation. Within months, engines based on his concepts would be powering spacecraft carrying human beings into the dangerous environment of deep space. The responsibility was both thrilling and terrifying, pushing Marcus to double and triple check every aspect of his work. As Marcus walked home from work that evening, he called his parents to share the good news about the latest breakthrough. His father's voice filled with pride as Marcus described how the team was finally working together effectively. "You know, mijo," David said, "fixing washing machines taught me that the best solutions are often the simplest ones. Sometimes when you're too close to a problem, it takes fresh eyes to see what's really needed." Marcus smiled as he realized his father had just perfectly summarized the key to his success. His outsider status, which had initially seemed like such a disadvantage, had actually been his greatest asset. He had approached familiar problems without the preconceptions that come from years of doing things a certain way. But Marcus also knew that his biggest challenges still lay ahead. Moving from successful prototypes to reliable production engines would test his skills and his team's abilities in ways they couldn't yet imagine. As Marcus stared at the data displays, weighing the evidence and considering the consequences of his decision, he realized that this moment would define not just the success of his engine design, but his entire future as an engineer. The overlooked Intern had become the person responsible for one of the most important aerospace projects in decades, and everything depended on the choices he made in the next few minutes. Marcus stared at the temperature readings for 10 agonizing seconds, his mind racing through possible explanations for the anomaly. The mission control room buzzed with quiet activity around him, but he felt completely alone with the weight of his decision. Aborting the test would mean months of additional development time and millions of dollars in wasted resources. Continuing could risk a spectacular failure that would destroy his reputation and set back Mars mission plans by years. Then he remembered something his father had told him years ago while teaching him to repair washing machines. When something doesn't feel right, even if you can't explain why, trust your instincts. Machines talk to you if you know how to listen. Marcus reached for his communication headset and spoke calmly into the microphone. "Mission Control, this is Chen. I'm recommending we abort the extended burn test. We have temperature anomalies that could indicate developing structural issues." Dr. Williams, who was serving as mission director, immediately questioned the decision. "Marcus, all systems are showing green. The engine is performing within specifications. Are you certain we need to abort?" "I'm certain," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the chaos of emotions inside him. "The temperature rise pattern doesn't match our models. Something is changing inside the combustion chamber that we can't see from external sensors." The decision was made within seconds. The engine was shut down remotely, and the test payload began its programmed return to Earth. As Marcus watched the telemetry data showing his engine powering down, he wondered if he had just made the biggest mistake of his career. The answer came 3 days later, when the payload was recovered and the engine was disassembled for analysis. Hidden inside the spiral injection assembly, engineers discovered hairline fractures that were invisible to external sensors, but were causing the temperature anomalies Marcus had detected. The fractures were in the early stages of development and would have led to catastrophic failure if the test had continued for another 10 minutes. "Your instinct saved not just this test, but possibly future missions," Dr. Williams told Marcus during the post-test analysis meeting. "If we hadn't discovered this problem now, those fractures could have developed during an actual Mars mission, potentially killing the crew." The discovery led to a breakthrough that made Marcus's engine design even more revolutionary than originally intended. The team developed a new manufacturing process that eliminated the conditions causing microfractures, while simultaneously improving the monitoring systems to detect even smaller structural changes. The result was an engine that was not only more efficient than traditional designs, but also significantly more reliable. 6 months later, Marcus found himself standing in the same conference room where he had first challenged Dr. Harrison's design, but now he was presenting to a very different audience. NASA administrators, International Space Agency representatives, and aerospace industry leaders had gathered to hear the final results of the Chen drive testing program. The presentation was a triumph. Marcus's engine had not only passed every AO test but had exceeded performance projections in ways that would revolutionize space exploration. The improved fuel efficiency meant Mars missions could carry larger crews or more supplies. The enhanced reliability provided safety margins that made ambitious exploration missions feasible for the first time. But perhaps most importantly, the innovative monitoring systems developed during the project had applications far beyond rocket engines. The artificial intelligence techniques pioneered by Marcus's team were being adapted for monitoring everything from aircraft engines to nuclear power plants, potentially saving countless lives through early detection of developing problems. As Marcus concluded his presentation and answered questions from the distinguished audience, he caught sight of his parents in the back of the room. Elena and David had taken time off from work to attend, wearing their best clothes and beaming with pride as their son spoke confidently about concepts that had once seemed impossibly complex. After the formal presentation ended, Marcus was surrounded by executives making offers and reporters seeking interviews. But he politely excused himself and walked to the back of the room where his parents waited with tears in their eyes. "Mijo," Elena said softly, embracing her son. "When you were little and spent all those nights looking at stars, I worried you were wasting time dreaming about impossible things. I never imagined your dreams could help so many people reach those stars." The success of the Chen drive led to opportunities Marcus had never imagined. He was offered positions at NASA, prestigious universities, and major aerospace companies around the world. Several investors approached him about starting his own company to commercialize his innovations. The shy intern who had once been afraid to speak up in meetings was now being courted by the most powerful organizations in the aerospace industry. But Marcus chose to stay with Stellar Dynamics, accepting a promotion to Chief Innovation Officer that would allow him to mentor the next generation of young engineers while continuing to develop revolutionary propulsion technologies. He established an internship program specifically designed to identify and nurture talented students from underrepresented backgrounds, ensuring that future innovations wouldn't be limited by economic or social barriers. The first Mars mission, powered by Marcus's engine design, launched 2 years later, carrying a crew of 6 astronauts on humanity's most ambitious space exploration mission. Marcus watched the launch from mission control, surrounded by the team that had helped turn his crazy idea into reality. As the massive rocket disappeared into the blue sky, carrying human beings toward another planet with technology that had originated in his tiny apartment, Marcus felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Tom Bradley, who had become Marcus's deputy and closest collaborator, stood beside him during the launch. "You know what I think is the most impressive thing about all this?" Tom said as they watched the rocket's exhaust trail fade into the distance. "What's that?" Marcus asked. "It's not that you had a brilliant idea, though you did. It's not that you had the courage to speak up when everyone thought you were wrong, though that took incredible guts. It's that you never forgot where you came from or let success change who you are fundamentally." Marcus smiled, thinking about the long journey from building cardboard rockets above his parents' laundromat to watching his engines carry astronauts to Mars. "I learned something important from my parents," he said. "They taught me that the purpose of success isn't to escape where you came from, but to use your opportunities to help others reach their potential too." That evening, Marcus returned to his childhood neighborhood and had dinner with his parents in the apartment above the laundromat. The same fire escape where he had once gazed at stars and dreamed impossible dreams now had a small plaque installed by the city, designating it as the place where visionary engineer Marcus Chen first conceived the innovations that would revolutionize space travel. As they sat around the kitchen table sharing a simple meal, Elena asked her son about his plans for the future. Marcus looked out the window at the stars that had inspired his journey and smiled. "I want to keep building things that help people explore the universe," he said simply. "And I want to make sure that other kids who grow up in places like this know that their dreams aren't too big, no matter where they start." The overlooked intern had not only outperformed every veteran design, but had proven that innovation could come from the most unexpected places. More importantly, he had shown that success was not about leaving your origins behind, but about using your achievements to lift others up and expand the boundaries of human possibility. Years later, as the first permanent Mars colony was established, using propulsion systems derived from Marcus's original designs, children around the world would learn about the young man who had dared to challenge conventional wisdom and had literally helped humanity reach for the stars. His story became a reminder that the next breakthrough might come from anywhere, from the quiet student in the back of the classroom, the intern fetching coffee, or the dreamer gazing at stars from a fire escape above a neighborhood laundromat. 6 months after Marcus's dramatic presentation, Stellar Dynamics was preparing for the most important test in the company's history. A full-scale version of Marcus's engine design would be mounted on an unmanned rocket and launched into space, where it would undergo rigorous performance testing that would determine whether the design was ready for human missions to Mars. The months leading up to the test had been intense beyond anything Marcus had experienced. His small team had grown into a full department of 30 engineers, technicians, and specialists, all working around the clock to transform his prototype concept into a space-worthy propulsion system. The pressure was enormous. The company had invested millions of dollars and staked its reputation on the success of what everyone now called the Chen Drive. Marcus found the attention both gratifying and overwhelming. Industry publications had published articles about the young engineer, whose innovative thinking had revolutionized rocket design. NASA executives had visited Stellar Dynamics to observe the development process, and competitors were scrambling to understand how they had missed such a fundamental breakthrough. But success had brought complications Marcus hadn't anticipated. Dr. Harrison, while maintaining professional courtesy, had requested a transfer to a different division rather than continue working on a project that constantly reminded everyone of her oversight. Several senior engineers from other companies had approached Marcus with lucrative job offers, promising him the chance to start his own research division or even his own company. The most challenging aspect was the responsibility Marcus felt for the lives that would eventually depend on his engine design. Every calculation, every material choice, every manufacturing decision carried the weight of knowing that astronauts would trust their lives to his work. The teenage boy who had built model rockets on a fire escape now held the fate of space missions in his hands. Tom Bradley had become not just a mentor but a close friend, helping Marcus navigate both the technical challenges and the political complexities of his new position. The hardest part about being responsible for something important, Tom told him during one of their late-night design sessions, is learning to trust your work when other people's lives depend on it. The pre-launch testing phase revealed both the strengths and limitations of Marcus's design. The engine performed beautifully under normal operating conditions, exceeding all projected specifications for thrust, efficiency, and reliability. But stress testing revealed some unexpected challenges that required innovative solutions. During a high-temperature endurance test, the spiral injection system developed microfractures that could potentially lead to catastrophic failure during extended burns. The problem was subtle. The fractures were invisible during normal operation but grew progressively larger under extreme conditions. Traditional detection methods couldn't identify the issue until it was too late to prevent failure. Marcus spent sleepless nights studying the problem, consulting with materials experts and running countless computer simulations. The solution came to him during a conversation with his mother, who mentioned that she could always tell when the hospital's washing machines needed maintenance by listening to subtle changes in their sound patterns. This observation sparked an idea that would solve the microfracture problem. Marcus proposed installing acoustic monitoring sensors throughout the injection system that could detect the specific sound frequencies produced by developing fractures. The sensors would provide early warning of potential failures, allowing for preventive maintenance before problems became critical. The solution was elegant in its simplicity, but implementing it required integrating complex monitoring systems into an already sophisticated engine design. Marcus's team worked for weeks to develop sensors that could operate reliably in the extreme environment of space, while providing the precise measurements needed for fracture detection. The breakthrough came when Jennifer, who had completed her internship and joined the company as a full-time engineer, suggested using a monitoring approach she had learned about in her business studies. Instead of trying to detect fractures directly, they would monitor the engine's overall performance signature and use artificial intelligence to identify patterns that indicated developing problems. This approach proved remarkably effective during testing. The AI system could predict potential failures days or even weeks before they would occur, providing astronauts with plenty of time to take corrective action or switch to backup systems. The innovation not only solved the immediate problem but created a new standard for space-grade equipment monitoring that other companies would later adopt. As the launch date approached, Marcus found himself dealing with media attention he had never wanted or expected. Reporters called him constantly, seeking interviews about his background and his revolutionary engine design. Magazine articles described him as a genius who emerged from nowhere and speculated about his future in the aerospace industry. The attention made Marcus uncomfortable, partly because he felt it diminished the contributions of his team members who had helped turn his concepts into reality. During one particularly frustrating interview, he found himself explaining that innovation was rarely the work of a single person, but rather the result of collaborative effort and institutional support. "I had an idea," Marcus told the reporter, "but it took 30 brilliant engineers, technicians, and specialists to turn that idea into something that could actually fly." The real story isn't about me. It's about what happens when companies are willing to listen to unconventional perspectives and invest in developing them properly. The week before the test launch, Marcus's parents visited Stellar Dynamics for the first time. Elena and David walked through the facility with wide eyes, marveling at the sophisticated equipment and the bustling activity of engineers preparing for the mission. Marcus gave them a personal tour, explaining his work in simple terms and introducing them to his colleagues. Tom Bradley pulled Marcus aside during the visit and shared something that touched him deeply. "Your parents should be incredibly proud," Tom said, "not just because you're successful, but because of how you've handled that success. You could have let all this attention go to your head, but instead, you've become one of the best team leaders I've ever worked with." The night before the launch, Marcus couldn't sleep. He walked onto his apartment balcony and stared up at the stars, remembering all the nights he had spent as a child dreaming about contributing to space exploration. Tomorrow, his engine would carry a payload beyond Earth's atmosphere, beginning a test sequence that would determine whether his design was ready for missions to Mars and beyond. His phone buzzed with a text message from Mrs. Rodriguez, his high school physics teacher who had encouraged his early interest in rockets. "Watching the launch tomorrow," her message read. "Proud of you, but not surprised. You always had the curiosity and determination to do something important." The launch facility was buzzing with activity when Marcus arrived before dawn. Engineers and technicians made final preparations while executives and VIP guests gathered in the observation center. Marcus felt the weight of everyone's expectations as he took his place at the mission control console, where he would monitor his engine's performance throughout the test sequence. At exactly 8:00 a.m., the countdown began. Marcus watched the telemetry displays showing fuel pressure, combustion chamber temperature, and thrust vectoring data from his engine. Every parameter looked perfect as the rocket lifted off from the launch pad, carrying his life's work toward the stars. The first phase of the test went flawlessly. Marcus's engine performed exactly as predicted, providing smooth acceleration and precise trajectory control as the rocket climbed through the atmosphere. The spiral injection system operated perfectly, delivering the superior fuel efficiency that had been demonstrated in ground testing. But the real test would come during the extended burn phase, where the engine would run continuously for 45 minutes while carrying out complex orbital maneuvers. This was the scenario that would prove whether Marcus's design could handle the demands of actual Mars missions, where engines needed to operate reliably for months without maintenance. 20 minutes into the extended burn, Marcus noticed a subtle anomaly in the combustion temperature readings. The temperatures were still within acceptable ranges, but they were rising more quickly than the computer models had predicted. His heart rate increased as he realized they might be seeing the early stages of the microfracture problem they thought they had solved. The acoustic monitoring system remained silent, showing no indication of developing fractures. But Marcus's instincts, honed by months of intimate familiarity with his engine's behavior, told him something wasn't quite right. He faced a crucial decision. Should he recommend aborting the test based on subtle readings that might be meaningless, or continue the mission and risk a potentially catastrophic failure that could destroy years of work?